Picture this. It's 1919 in a small Midwestern town. A man in overalls steps out of his farmhouse at dawn, stretches and downs a tin cup of whiskey, before heading off to plow the fields with sharp spinning steel blades. Meanwhile, his wife pours herself a breakfast beer to take the edge off while making biscuits. To us, that sounds like a recipe for disaster. To them, it was Tuesday. Welcome to America before Prohibition, a country where alcohol wasn't just a pastime, it was a lifestyle. And welcome to the wild, messy, and often absurd story of how the US government decided to ban booze, and in the process created an underground empire of moonshiners, mobsters, and cocktail-shaking rebels. From the very beginning, alcohol was baked into American life. The Mayflower, legend has it, stopped at Plymouth Rock not because it was the perfect landing spot, but because the colonists were running low on beer. Colonial taverns weren't just bars, they were community centers, post offices, and sometimes even courthouses. By the early 1800s, alcohol flowed everywhere. Cider was a breakfast drink, whiskey was cheaper than milk. Politicians bribed voters with barrels of rum. Even children sipped watered-down ale. Per capita, Americans drank nearly 3 times more alcohol than we do today. Imagine your office happy hour, except it never ends. But what felt normal at the time came with consequences. Families suffered from alcohol abuse. Domestic violence was rampant. Wages disappeared at the saloon instead of feeding kids. By the mid-19th century, some Americans, especially women, were fed up. This discontent sparked the temperance movement. Temperance originally meant moderation, but in America, moderation quickly turned into a demand for total abstinence. Why women? Because they were often the ones left to pick up the pieces of alcohol abuse. Husbands drank away paychecks, left families in poverty, or turned violent at home. Women couldn't vote yet, but they could organize, and organize they did. The Women's Christian Temperance Union (WCTU) emerged as a powerhouse. Members marched, prayed outside saloons, and sang hymns to shame drinkers. They weren't just trying to stop drinking. They linked alcohol to bigger social evils like poverty, crime, and even sin itself. Then came one of the most colorful reformers in American history, Carrie Nation. A towering figure with unshakable conviction, Carrie literally stormed into bars swinging a hatchet, smashing bottles, and scaring patrons half to death. She called her crusades hatchetations. Imagine today's activists throwing paint on SUVs, but instead, it's your local dive bar getting hacked to bits. She became both a folk hero and a national joke, but her antics kept temperance in the headlines. Religious conviction wasn't enough to outlaw alcohol to win. Temperance advocates needed political muscle, and they got it through the Anti-Saloon League. Unlike the WCTU, the League wasn't focused on morality plays. They were laser-focused lobbyists. They pressured politicians, ran aggressive ad campaigns, and punished anyone who opposed them. If you wanted a political career in the early 1900s, crossing the Anti-Saloon League was a death sentence. They also tapped into nativism. Beer was associated with German immigrants, who owned many breweries. As World War I raged, being anti-beer suddenly meant being patriotic. Saloons weren't just places to drink, they were painted as dens of corruption, where immigrant men wasted money while America's moral fabric unraveled. By the 1910s, the stage was set. Reformers had the moral high ground, the political machinery, and the wartime fervor. All they needed was a big, bold victory. That victory came in 1919 with the ratification of the 18th Amendment, followed by the Volstead Act, which defined the rules. What did Prohibition actually ban? Not drinking itself, that remained technically legal. It banned the manufacture, sale, and transportation of intoxicating liquors. And thanks to some creative definitions, intoxicating basically meant anything stronger than near beer. Overnight, America went dry, or at least, it was supposed to. People celebrated in churches and parades. Headlines promised a new age of moral living. Reformers imagined a sober nation where crime and poverty would disappear. They were about to be very disappointed. Almost immediately, Americans found ways around the law. Existing private stock was legal, so if you had a cellar full of whiskey, congrats, you were set for a decade. Doctors could prescribe medicinal whiskey. Churches could order wine for communion. Pharmacies sold alcohol with a wink. Entrepreneurs saw opportunity. One company sold Vinglow grape bricks, labeled with the warning, "Do not dissolve in water and leave in a jug for 21 days or it will turn into wine." Naturally, that's exactly what people did. Home brewing and bathtub gin became national pastimes. Instead of erasing alcohol, Prohibition turned every kitchen, basement, and back alley into a distillery. The government was woefully unprepared to enforce the ban. The Prohibition Bureau had too few agents, many underpaid and easily bribed. Police departments looked the other way. Judges tossed cases. Meanwhile, smugglers brought liquor from Canada and the Caribbean. Bootleggers ran elaborate operations, from rural stills to urban speakeasies, and then came organized crime. Figures like Al Capone rose to power, building empires on bootleg booze. Shootouts, bribes, and turf wars turned cities like Chicago into battle zones. And in one of the most shocking policies of the era, The government deliberately poisoned industrial alcohol used in paints and solvents to discourage people from drinking it. Instead, thousands died or were blinded from tainted liquor. Public trust in the noble experiment began to collapse. Ironically, Prohibition didn't kill drinking culture, it reinvented it. Speakeasies flourished, often hidden behind soda shops or in basements with secret passwords. Jazz music pulsed, flappers danced, and cocktails became trendy. People who never drank before now did it for the thrill of breaking the rules. Middle-class Americans, not just hardened criminals, were suddenly law breakers that blurred the line between respectable society and criminality. The law itself began to look ridiculous. By the late 1920s, support for Prohibition was crumbling. Crime was worse than ever. Corruption was everywhere. The promised social benefits never arrived. Even some temperance leaders admitted defeat. The Great Depression delivered the final blow. Ending Prohibition meant creating jobs and raising tax revenue from legal alcohol sales, a lifeline for a struggling economy. In 1933, the 21st Amendment repealed Prohibition, making it the only constitutional amendment ever overturned. People poured into the streets to celebrate with legal pints, cocktails, and champagne. After 13 years, America's noble experiment was officially over. Prohibition was meant to solve deep problems: poverty, abuse, crime. Instead, it amplified them, empowered organized crime, and revealed how hard it is to legislate personal behavior. But it also left behind a legacy: cocktail culture, organized crime law, and an enduring cautionary tale about unintended consequences. So next time you order a drink, raise a glass to one of the strangest chapters in U.S. history, the time America tried to go dry and ended up wetter than ever. Cheers.